couple of years, maybe participated in the 2020 DeFi summer and the big farming seasons of 2021, you should all be familiar with Liquity, at least with their V1. So thanks a lot for coming on the pod, Sam. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to speak about Liquity and also, you know, share the good world about a good word about decentralization.
How did you find your way to Liquity? And if you were involved from the get go, how did the original idea emerge?
Yeah, I think the original idea emerged with Robert, our founder. At the time in 2021 when Liquity launched, there was no venue where you could really the interest rates were near zero or close to zero because it was peak COVID at the time, and there was really no venue where you could borrow without an interest rate or borrow essentially with just like a one-time fee. And Robert and also the co-founder Rick, they're big decentralization maxis, so to speak. They wanted to create something where you could get debt for cheap while also kind of adhering to the Ethereum principles of having an immutable protocol that is not controlled by anyone, that's kind of very, very Ethereum aligned. And that kind of grew the idea of Liquidity V1 and LUSD and being able to mint LUSD with ETH. And at the time, it was pretty revolutionary because the only other protocol or CDP that allowed you to do this, where you could use ETH as collateral and mint, was DAI at the time. But then DAI also, I think we came upon a nice situation at the time where I think they were kind of debating between moving into multi-collateral DAI and to see what DAI is now today, and also to what USDS and everything has happened. So it was kind of like a lightning strike moment where there was two components. One was, we kind of took advantage of the situation where interest rates were at all-time low and people really wanted cheap debt, and that was a market that facilitated that. And then second, what really helped us at the time was ETH at the time was like close to its all-time high. Like it was really pumping, and it was like a very exciting and frothy situation where people just wanted to leverage up ETH if they could. And that brought the idea of Liquidity V1 and LUSD. For me, I at the time, that I got into crypto like 2019, just buying Bitcoin and ETH and just having at the time like just some savings into that. But what changed for me was a DeFi summer. I was an early participant of DeFi summer, so I kind of played around with everything that you can think of, from your yam, your sushi shop to whatever there is. And with Liquity, holding a lot of ETH at the time, I was looking at ways in which I could, do delta neutral farming at the time. That was my main thing. I had this ETH. What can I do with DeFi? And with Liquity, the fact that you could borrow for 0.5%, the fact that there was a one-time fee, there was no interest rate, the LTV was at the time the highest and still is one of the most competitive even after all these years at 91%. Like, it was a very elegant system to me. Immutable as well at the time. The rewards of the stability pool were very good too, and it was just kind of like I have always been kind of enamored by protocols that follow this decentralization ethos, or that try to be as governance minimized as possible. And kind of Liquidity was like a lightning rod with that, where it combined that element but also with good yields at the time. So that made me a user, one of the first users of Liquidity V2, Liquidity V1, sorry, and also ended up me being quite active on the Discord and being a kind of a community member, so to speak. And then fast forward a couple of months, at the time I was working on in the TV industry, a completely different industry. But then I was so well versed in DeFi that I kind of pinged the key contributors of Liquity, and I was like, hey, I saw this growth position. I do this on my Web2 job. Would this be something where we could work something out? And then had a few calls, and then I joined Liquity, like I think 6 or 7 months after it launched, so pretty quickly after. And I've been here ever since, almost 4 years now.
Very nice. Speaking of Liquidity V1, how were you able to offer cheaper rates than, let's say, Maker and Sky nowadays, which you already talked about being somewhat similar back in the days?
Right. So I think the main reason then was debt. We realized that debt was becoming cheaper and cheaper in other money markets and uh, in um, in just DeFi in general at the time. But then it was not cheap enough. So it was kind of around 2%, 3%, 2.5%, and there was it made it was like, as I mentioned in my original answer, it was kind of like a perfect situation where rates were coming down and the demand for leverage was going up as well. And the way the other thing that really helped was at the time with the liquidity mining incentives that we had, you could kind of run carry trades at a profit as well, where you could hold LUSD and the stability pool and still be able to earn quite decent yield. So you didn't really have to kind of dump the stable coin for something else. And this also leads to why we had to work on V2 later. We'll talk about it later. So yeah, at the time it was kind of like a perfect storm, so to speak. Um, Rates across DeFi were low, and we were able to offer there was a demand to hold bold for LUSD for $1 because of the yields that it was generating as well. Um, and Yeah, that's the main reason.
Skipping forward to the stablecoin landscape of today, what is Liquidity's place to be in that entire landscape, and what sets you guys apart?
Yeah, I think the main thing is with Liquidity V2, we have built a very unique and elaborate system where we cater to both borrowers and stablecoin holders. So I think of it as like a two-sided marketplace. For borrowers, what we offer is we offer the ability for you to customize your own interest rates. This is not something that any DeFi protocol offers today. So you can go in with your ETH, your Lido ETH, or your Rocket Pool ETH. Those are the three collateral assets that we accept. Uh, Us being Liquidity, we have made the protocol immutable. You can go in and you can set the interest rate to your liking. So this is quite different to something like Aave or Morpho or other money markets where rates are based on kind of like utilization factors. Here you are in full control over, okay, you want to set it at 3%, 4%, 5%, whatever. You can be as capital efficient as you want to be, and you can also kind of be conservative if you want to be as well. So that's the first thing for these very I want to say sophisticated players or ones who are very cognizant about setting the lowest rate. I think we offer the cheapest rates in the market, and later I'll show some data which supports that for those three assets. So on the borrower side, that's one thing, and it also means predictable rates because they control whatever they set, and you don't get random spikes all the time. And on the stablecoin side, we offer a stablecoin in Bold, which first of all, it is only backed by Ether and LSTs, so it makes it very, very robust in terms of it has no off-chain dependency. It has no kind of like counterparty risk in terms of different let's say off-chain stuff. It's always redeemable at all times, so you can always redeem the Bold for the underlying ETH from the system if anything were to happen. It's one of the things about Liquidity is that we divert 100% of protocol revenues right now to grow Bold, which means that as long as there's borrowing demand for Bold, there is yield for Bold as well, which means it's kind of self-sustaining in a way as well, and that's kind of like the beauty of it. And if you combine all these things together, you have a two-sided marketplace, like I mentioned, where for borrowers, you get cheap loans or also loans that you can fully control. No terms and conditions are changed in the sense that the protocol is immutable. And on the stablecoin side, you hold something that is censorship resistant. It can never be frozen. It's only backed by ETH and LSTs. Your stablecoin always has a redemption feature, meaning that if something like the Silicon Valley situation happens again, where bank runs or etc., or in our case that can never happen, that can not really happen because it's only backed by the ETH and LSTs that I mentioned. And then on the yield side as well, like we provide this sustainable yield. It's not going to be your highest. It's not going to be your 20-25% anchor Terra Luna days. But if you look at the risk adjusted side, over the last 9 months since we've launched, we've offered like 6% or so, which if you compare to your SDIs, your SUSDSs, and even just lending your collateral, your stablecoin out on Aave, it's quite competitive when it comes to that.
To dive a little deeper into the mechanisms and the minting process of Bolt and how to supply collateral, can you walk us through the platform and explain how the V2 mechanisms work?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me share my screen. Right. So hopefully you see my screen here. So let me just know if it's all clear in terms of the screen.
Yeah.
Cool. Right. So on Liquity, there's a few different things you can do, but the main use case for a lot of users is they come in and you can borrow Bold against these 3 collateral assets, which are ETH, Lido ETH, and Rocket Pool ETH. Let's start with Lido ETH, for example. On Lido ETH, it's kind of similar to any other money market that you have been a part of, or even other CDPs. You deposit your collateral, let's say 100 collateral. You borrow Bold. You can borrow up to 83.3% in terms of loan to value for Lido ETH. For ETH, for example, we offer 91%, which is one of the highest in the space. But even for Lido ETH, I think our LTV is quite high. So let's just give an example. We're borrowing 50 Lido ETH. We're taking a loan of 65K Bold. Now, this is the cool component of the interest rate. Here, you have multiple options that you can do when you set up an interest rate. So setting your interest rate is very interesting, because what you can do is you can set interest rate based on a slider here, and you'll see here that there's something called redeemable before you, and you might be wondering, what is that? So before I dig into that, I just want to show you what you can do. So right now, Lido ETH, I think, offers you a 2.3% yield, but you can borrow for as cheap as 1% and literally have 16 million ahead of you of Bold that can get redeemed. And you might be wondering, what's redemptions? What is setting this interest rate? Like, what is all this? Redemptions, since Liquity is an immutable protocol, is a way for Bold to hold its peg when it drops under $1. So let's say it drops to like 0.994. What happens is you can redeem that $0.994 worth of Bold that you have in your wallet for the underlying ETH in the system. And the underlying ETH in the system, the one who is affected first is the person paying the least amount of interest. So that's kind of like the mechanism of this setting your own interest rate, and that's kind of like the catch, let's say, for users when they come into the protocol.
On the note of the setting your own interest rate, have you seen over time like the kind of sweet spot that people choose change depending on the market conditions and sentiment?
Yeah,
or is it more constant?
A very good question. So a lot of users, so this is one of the kind of a feedback we got from our users too, like setting their own interest rate for a lot of the more active, sophisticated users there. You can change it anytime. So that's one of the beauties of Liquidity V2, where if you change your interest rate over like after every 7 days, there is no fee that you incur. So the more like except for the gas fee, obviously. So a lot of the active users, they kind of are quite, they adjust it quite a bit. But for a lot of users, what they have done is that with Liquidity V2, there are all these different interest rate managers as well, who are called interest rate delegates. And their main remit is to make sure that you as a user do not get redeemed. And the only thing that they control is your interest rate. So your wallet still holds the entire position, and they only manage the interest rate. So and you can also revoke access at any time. So, these are all the different delegates that they have. And a lot of users, what they've done is they don't want to kind of monitor managing their own positions. So they kind of delegate their positions to all these different delegates that you see here. So for example, Summerstone is one of these delegates. And Summerstone is charging 0.7% a year. So they're managing it for that. And they have a fee that they charge, which is their annual fee, which is only 0.3%. So for a lot of users, they're just using this like automated rate manager. And if we think about it, 0.7 plus 0.3, that's 1% that you're paying on a loan on Lido ETH, which is, cheaper than anywhere else. I'm pretty sure if you go into Aave or more for other venues, the minimum of borrowing cost would be like 3% or so. So the fact that Liquidity is very like uh, it's kind of peer to peer, so to speak, makes it very capital efficient compared to other venues. Um, so yeah, to answer your question, a lot of users they they tend to just use this managed delegates, and different delegates have different. For example, with Summerstone, they have two strategies where they have an aggressive strategy and a balanced strategy. The difference is the aggressive, obviously the rate is lower, the interest rate is lower, but then the redeemable before you rate amount of bold is also higher. So it kind of depends on what you go for. A lot of users, also the manual users, what they tend to do is they see, okay, how much debt in front of them there is, and bold is a stable coin with like 30-31 million of supply. So if you think about it, if you set it at 1.3% here, there is 16 million of bold ahead of you. So what they tend to do is they just go and see where the spikes are, and they just set themselves a little bit behind the spike, just to kind of be exempt from any risk. But one thing I want to say is redemptions is not inherently negative, because redemptions can be a positive thing too. Redemptions is essentially closing your long exposure to ETH. Um, and in a scenario where redemptions happen, and let's say right now it happens, so ETH is at, I don't know what, 2,300, 2,200. If your loan position gets closed today, right at that exact moment, you're going to get 2,200 worth of ETH back as bold, right? But in an hour or two, ETH could dump to 1,800. So it actually means that you made money from redemptions because your loan position got closed. So in a way, if you look at redemptions and historically over a 9 or 10 months, 60% of redemptions have actually been positive, because in the last 9 or 10 months, the ETH price has obviously gone down. So a lot of redemptions, when they happened at 3,500, 3,600, 3,700, those users are actually in the green at the moment. So you redemptions are not inherently negative is another component I wanted to say.
Have there been instances where people have basically used Bolt as a stop loss on their ETH position? Or
Yeah.
how would you say what would have to happen on chain for it to be advantageous to set up a scenario like getting liquidated on purpose, if you want to use that as a stop loss versus just going long ETH on a perp stacks like Hyperliquid, for example?
Yeah, so I think one of the one use case we have seen is that some borrowers will come in, like not today, but a few days ago, when ETH started to trend a little bit from 1,900 to 23 or so. What we saw users coming in and setting their interest rate super low, like the lowest possible at 0.5% or whatever it is, and just going 2x long on ETH. And essentially, when redemptions were happening, since they were paying the lowest interest rate in the system, they were kind of DCAing out of ETH because their loan position kept getting redeemed. So they're closing that position into bold. So that's kind of like a scenario with Liquidity, where, and obviously certain jurisdictions being redeemed is like a tax wise also, I think, has a different connotation of since it's a loan position compared to like opening a new position on a perp stack. So that also comes into play. So there are some strategies that some whales have done. But the way I think of Liquidity is like, if you want to have a 2x long and you want to have a position for a longer duration time frame, I'm talking about 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, then I think Liquidity is a much better venue to do that than compared to perp stacks, just because of the capital efficiency involved, in the sense
Yeah.
that you can
So
go
basically,
2x.
the trade-off is that if you want to have a very capital efficient, rather short to mid-term position, you probably want to go to a perp stacks. But
Yeah.
if it is a mid to long-term position, you don't want to take on a lot of leverage anyway. And yeah, you are also an avid DeFi farmer who can earn returns on Bold that largely exceed the borrow rate. And this is probably the better version than paying funding rates that are often exceeding the, let's say, setting your interest rate between 1 to 2%.
Exactly, correct. Yeah, and most of the users or the trolls that we have seen, they tend to open their position with us at least a month long, for the most part. So even these long positions, they're kind of, in perp world, it's like what, a week, if that, 5 days or whatever. In our case, it's a little different.
What are the multiply features and how do the stability pools work?
Yeah. So let's say you borrow Bold, and in this case, let's say you put in ETH and you borrow Bold. You have Bold now. You're paying an interest rate of 0.7%. There are a few different things you can do with your Bold. So as I mentioned earlier, Liquity V2 passes on 100% of protocol revenue towards growing Bold. 75% of that is fixed, and it goes to this different stability pool branches that you see here. So the ETH branch gets 75% of the ETH borrow fees. 75% of their Lido ETH goes to the Lido ETH, or Rocket Pool ETH goes to the Rocket Pool ETH. And they all have this different APRs that you see here. This APR right now, it's only accounting the borrowing fees, but not when liquidations happen. So one thing that the stability pool also does is that when liquidations happen, the stability pool is like the first line of defense to um, liquidate underwater positions. And we have a Dune dashboard. Actually, this is not the one. Gold yields is the one. Let me just pull it up. We have a Dune dashboard that shows you. That's not the one either. Gold asset yields. Let me just pull that up. Give me a minute. Where is it? While I find that, I'll show you the 90-day APRs here. If you see here, like the 90-day APRs of the stability pool on the ETH side of things, it's more like 7.81%, because obviously in February we had a lot of liquidations, so that kind of boosted that up. For the Rocket Pool ETH, we had 6.54%, and for the Lido ETH, we had, I believe, 5.91%. So the lifetime APR is what's more important to me, I think. Here, Lido ETH is at 6.69, Rocket Pool ETH is at 5.7, and ETH is at 5.7. You might be wondering, okay, what do I choose from? So you can choose between those three, but there's also another component to this where K3 Capital and Yearn have built like this vault on top of these three stability pools, which when liquidations happen, some of your Bold gets converted into ETH. And a lot of our users and community were like, I don't want that ETH exposure because I need to go and kind of sell that ETH back into Bold. And I want a way where this yield gets auto compounded. So they have built these vaults. So I'll go to the Yearn one for now. They've built these vaults where essentially they take that Bold and they deposit it into these stability pools where they believe that they can earn the highest yield, and they kind of automate that and like change it every 2 hours, I believe. And right now, for example, they have 46% there, 41% there, and 11% on the Lido ETH pool. And one of the cool things about the Yearn Bold token is that once you deposit your Bold into Yearn Bold, you get a Y Bold receipt token that you can use as, say, a PT position on Pendle, or you can also use it as a collateral on one of our forks as well. So it's kind of like a yield bearing 6% yield that is generating. You can, for example, go onto a protocol, a fork of ours called Asymmetry, use it as a collateral to mint a symmetry dollar, loop it up back to Bold, Y Bold, and kind of like play that looping game. So that's a like an option for a lot of users as well. And that's kind of like the inbuilt stability pool features that we have, where you can either deposit into one of these three and you kind of hope and see, one way is to go onto our Dune and see who are the most degen borrowers who are borrowing very close to the liquidation levels, and kind of deposit into the stability pools there. Or if you want a more passive, hands off, kind of automated, you could deposit into the Y Bold or S Bold, and maybe even use that in other DeFi venues as well. So that's how you can earn reward with Bold within the Liquity ecosystem. But there are also other ways in which you can use Bold. Um, Bold is integrated into 10 plus venues on mainnet. Some of them include, providing liquidity for bold USDC on Curve, providing liquidity for bold LUSD on Curve as well, providing bold USDC on Uniswap V4. And then these venues, you essentially earn that 25% of yield that I mentioned. So 75% of liquidity revenues goes towards the stability pool, but there's 25% that goes towards growing bold on external dexes. And if you go here, you will see that, there's a voting tab. And in that voting tab, liquidity stakers can vote for where that 25% goes every week. And right now, if you see here, there's all these different initiatives that are active right now. And 49%, for example, of the fees that Liquidity V2 generates each week goes to Bold USDC, 15% goes to Bold USDC on Uniswap, 14% goes to DeFi Collective, and blah, blah, blah. So this is a way in which, a very low risk way for users to earn yield on Bold is to either go to Bold USDC on Curve and to just deposit the Bold, and maybe if you have external USDC, provide it on Curve. And if you look at like the 90-day data of provide a lifetime APR providing Bold USDC on Curve, you make 6%, which is for the risk profile, it's pretty good. And if you look on Uniswap, it's more like 7%. Um, so these are some ways, and obviously I'll share this Dune dashboard. As I mentioned, there's 10 venues. It's not only that. You could also play the PT YT games with Pendle and Spectre if you'd like. As I mentioned, you can also use the yield bearing Bold on some of our forks and loop that up further. But our priority really as a being on mainnet and being very Ethereum aligned is to grow liquidity for Bold on mainnet as much as possible.
Having touched upon the friendly forks a couple of times now already, and also speaking of the YT portions that you can buy on Spectra or on Pendle, can you give us a rundown of how the friendly fork ecosystem works in and around Liquidity? Because I think that is somewhat of a unique feature and unique ecosystem. And what is the reason of like incentivizing people to fork your protocols? How do the airdrops work, and why don't you just expand yourself multi-chain?
Very good question. So I think users need a bit of context for this. So Liquidity V1 was forked like 35 plus times. I think in the history of DeFi, it's the third or fourth most forked protocol outside of Aave and Uniswap. So teams copied the code, launched on other chains, but they offered no recognition to Liquidity's community. They gave nothing back, and in most cases, they ended up failing or like, made some questionable modifications and like, had some bad debt or whatever. And, for us, we wanted to come up with a way in which, not for Liquidity, more for the stablecoin, wanted to find a way for the stablecoin Bold to get some bootstrapping mechanism, because, we realized when launching V2, we didn't want to create a new token, and we wanted to use this forkonomics program where, okay, if you want to fork us, feel free, but you need to give back something to Bold holders. So what we have is a friendly forks program where each fork can launch exclusively on different chains. They have to give back roughly around 4% of their token supply to Bold users on Liquidity mainnet, and also to growing Bold and their stablecoin on their chain. So as I mentioned again, it's more for Bold to help grow Bold rather than Liquidity AG. And the reason why we haven't deployed on other chains and why we're only on mainnet is because 3 reasons. One is obviously, first, our contracts are immutable and hard coded and only on mainnet. And if you look around, CDPs, they tend to exist only on the chain that they have deployed on, because with the liquidation functionality, the minting process, the redemptions and everything, it becomes very complex for CDPs to have like a one instance in one venue and then another in another, and then do that. So that's one. Second, we know Ethereum mainnet best, having created LUSD and Liquidity V1. We've been there. That's our kind of domain, and we're very Ethereum aligned. And the third thing is we are a very small team. Many people may not know this, but Liquidity team, core team, is like 7 people. So for us to go on to all these 15, 20 different chains and kind of bootstrap a community, grow like from day one, like that would be quite challenging. Um, Especially for CDP, bootstrapping is a little bit different compared to uh, some other type of models. So those were the main reasons why we opted for this friendly fork model. And with the friendly fork, I just wanted to show you a dashboard of the different friendly forks that we have and how they're performing. So we have as of right now, I believe 8 friendly forks that are live, and they have all done different things. So you can do you can use different collateral types on these friendly forks. So for example, we have one on Hyperliquid that a lot of people know of. They're not only a liquidity friendly fork, they're more than us. But Felix is an example where you can use Hype as collateral, mint FEUSD, and you can kind of do different things with FEUSD, like provide liquidity for it on Curve with Bold and USDC. You earn points for that, but you can also do different things. You have Enosis on Flare, which is an XRP EVM chain. There, you can also provide, say, XRP as collateral and mint the Flare stablecoin. So all these different forks, the logic behind them is to become like the sovereign stablecoin of their chain, where they support the collateral asset of their chain, and that's kind of like the logic behind that. Nerite is another one on Arbitrum, and Asymmetry is another one as well. And as you see here, all of them have like an obligation where they have to reward a portion of their tokens towards Liquity Bold holders. And so far, Enosis are the ones who have provided their rewards. But over the coming months, as market conditions pick up as well, we hope to see quite a lot more of these to come to life and give rewards back to Bold users as well. And you might be wondering, okay, so if I'm providing liquidity for Bold on the stability pool and the Curve Uniswap pools, like, do I get additional rewards? Yes, you do. So you get the Bold USDC 4.8% native APR that you're getting, but on top of that, you also get kind of like these different fork allocations as well. And we expect the fork allocations to kind of add, like, it's hard to say now, but probably 2 to 4%, depending on what valuations they come out at. It's a lot of, like, we don't know what valuations they're going to be at, but you can expect a little bit more of a bonus on top of that, what you're providing on mainnet from those forks as well.
Yeah, I've had a Ethan from Ibisu Finance on the pod, I think last summer or last fall. So on the topic of forks, are any of them doing anything different right now, or what would you say are the biggest differentiators between the forks and Liquid EV2?
Yeah, quite a lot of them. So with Liquid V2, obviously, first, we're immutable. So a lot of these forks are not immutable because they want to accept different collateral types. They want to be quite flexible. And that's one of the reasons why we did the friendly fork model as well. So Ibisu is a very good use case. With Liquid V2, as I mentioned, there's a 75% split between the stability pools and growing liquidity for Bold and external dexes. But for Ibisu, what they've done is they've flipped it around, where 25 is going to the stability pool and 75 is going to growing EBUSD and USDC on Curve. And the reason they did that is because they want people to take out leverage, and they want to be able to facilitate that leverage. They need to have ample liquidity for EBUSD. So that's like one example. Some of the other examples is that, for example, Enosis have taken a very interesting approach similar to Liquidity V1, where on top of giving that stability pool fees of 75% to the depositors of their stablecoin in the stability pool, they're also shooting out their token rewards on top of that as well. So you get the borrow fees and whatever that is, I don't know, 5-6%, but on top of that, you get their tokens too, which bumps that yield up to more closer to double digits, right? So yeah, those are kind of like the two use cases that I see right now that are quite different, and I want to say a little innovative. But a lot of them also have just taken like the cookie cutter that we provide and kind of added more collaterals on top of it as well. One other one that has it's differentiated itself a little bit is Nerite, where they have taken 10 different collateral types. You can borrow against like Bitcoin, or the threshold Bitcoin, sorry, compound ARB, and all these different assets. And they've partnered up with a entity called Superform, I believe it's called, where the rewards are streamed every block. So the stability pool receives like a reward pretty much continuously, which is pretty cool. And then there's also Asymmetry, which have kind of adopted more of our approach, where they have, I think, 4 or 5 different collaterals, immutable, so kind of very similar to us, and um, kind of opted for just cookie cutter like us.
What is the role of the Liquity token, and yeah, how has it evolved in its role over time? We already covered the voting of yield distribution. Are there any other use cases, or yeah, what is the reason why anybody would hold it right now?
Yeah, very good question. So the main use case is that you, by staking LQTY on V2, you earn the fees from V1. So V1 is still out there, and V1 still has 200 million in TVL, 30, 36, 37 million of LUSD out there, and still you see borrows on V1. So you still get fees from V1. So that's one of the reasons, and that still has an APR that you get. So that's one of the benefits of staking LQTY in V2. You keep that, and then on staking LQTY in V2 also gives you another benefit. First, you control this 25% of Liquity V2 revenues that the protocol generates, and you are able to allocate to different DEX initiatives. And then another benefit is that a lot of these DEX initiatives, they bribe LQTY voters as well to vote for their particular initiative. So an example is, let's say this week the protocol has generated $5,000, right? And let's say an example I'll give is Ekubo, because they participated in bribing before. They're bribing LQTY voters, let's say $2,000 to vote for their pool, so that they get they earn a yield. They earn more than the $2,000 that they provide as bribes, as rewards that they can deposit into the Bold USDC pool, so that the protocol can divert more of the 25% towards that particular initiative. So LQTY voters can earn bribes from bribe markets that are being built. And then the third thing as well is, we expect to hopefully see like a kind of like a curve wars dynamic, where you get a bribing market evolve. And that's another reason why you as an LQTY staker might want to hold LQTY, because this can happen. Now, let's say Bold grows to 200 million, 250 million. Like, we right now we're at a 30, 31 million, but let's say it goes quite high, and there's ample liquidity for it. And the whole purpose of this PIL 25% right now going to Bold USDC is so that the stablecoin grows. That's their first priority. Stablecoin needs to grow as much as it can. But let's say it hits like a decent number, 200, 250, whatever it is. There is a possibility where, LQDY voters are like, okay, we have had the protocol grow to a substantial amount. Bold is at 200 million supply. It's really high. Maybe we should give 5% of the protocol revenues back to us as fees as well. So that's a beauty of Liquidity V2, where this 25% right now is going for Bold USDC to grow Bold, but at an eventual time where Bold supply reaches a certain level, LQDY voters may come up with an initiative that says, I want 5% of the protocol revenue or 10% of the protocol revenue to go to me as a staker. So that's also a component that can change, like that fee switch component, I guess.
Having covered the yield opportunities and all the different stuff you can do with LUSD and also Bold quite extensively, what would you say comes down to the predominantly chosen user behavior? Like, what are people actually doing? Is there the majority of Bold just deposited in the stability pool vaults, or like what are people mostly using it for? Because I think the question that many people are asking themselves is, okay, do I just want to use Bolt to get a cheap loan against my ETH, maybe cheaper than I can get it on Aave, cheaper than I can get it on Morpho, and with a more predictable rate. But then what do I do with that? Do I just swap it for USDC or USDT and then use that for yield farming in some other way? Or is there any, like, maybe looking a little more at the very active and the larger users, what are they doing predominantly with their Bolt and also LUSD?
Awesome. Good question. First of all, a lot of our leveragers are using us for cheap leverage. So, as I mentioned with our collaterals, you can set your own interest rate. So a lot of users are going with their Lido ETH and kind of capturing the borrowing at 1%, and capturing the just going along on Lido ETH. That's one example, or the other ETH. So that's one. Another thing that a lot of sophisticated, more allocators are doing is they're doing a carry trade with Liquity, where they borrow Bolt at 1%. They sell half of that Bolt into USDC, and then they take that Bolt USDC and they LP on Curve. So if you do kind of like the carry trade, so if you see you can borrow Bolt at 1%, you're already earning 2.3% on the ETH. You're taking that Bolt, you're borrowing at, let's say, 50% LTV. You take that Bolt and USDC, you LP on Curve. You're getting net around 5% on your Lido ETH, which is pretty good. So a lot of the users are also doing that, and that's also another. I think you'll come to this at one point, but to make it a little bit easier for our users, we're also going to have some carry trade strategies where we're working with Yearn and iPort to come up with these deposit your ETH and earn 4%. And then on the underlying back end, what happens is that these curators will use wherever the loan is cheapest here, and then kind of borrow Bolt and deposit it into Curve or Uniswap and do that. So that's another thing that users are doing, this delta neutral ETH strategy. Now, moving on to people who don't want ETH exposure, who just want Bolt exposure and just want to earn yield on Bolt. There is two components to this. One is the risk adjusted, very vanilla. I want to earn 6%, 6% a year on my Bolt. I want very little minimal contract risk. Those users, and like this is more like your DAOs, your foundations, your this kind of bigger whales who are more in capital preservation mode. These people are just depositing into either one of these stability pools or on Y Bolt or S Bolt, and they're just getting 5-6%. And then there's the more still risk adjusted people who want to earn a little bit more yield than that, but also maybe get some they want to be able to kind of move around their funds a little bit more actively. These users, they're providing liquidity for Bolt on Curve and Uniswap, and they're just earning that 6 or 7% that those two venues are providing. And yeah, that's what they're doing with it. So all in all, I would say we're still a very risk adjusted type of venue. It's not your degen kind of loop up 10x kind of do all that kind of stuff. We're still kind of a very vanilla deposit here, earn 5%, or deposit on Curve or Uniswap and earn 7%. And I think the benefit of us is that we have a lot of atomic liquidity that you can just go in and out very quickly. We don't have this like fixed duration, fixed maturity, or anything like that. So even if our yields might be a little bit lower, the risk with us is also a lot lower, because you're essentially using all immutable products here, right? You're using Uniswap, which has the track record, you're using Curve, which has the track record, and you're using Liquity, which is also, I guess now 10 months of track record as well. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
What is your current growth strategy like, both for Bolt and if you're still trying to grow LUSD, also for LUSD? Maybe also put that question in the context of more institutions and more RWAs moving on chain, and the width and the growth of the very DeFi native part and the degen part of the industry stalling, if not even declining, over the past couple of months?
Great question. So on the growth strategy for the DeFi degen retails, more like retail allocator funds, I would say We are working on these carry trade vaults where, for us at the end of the day, growing bold supply is what we value. So we're going to have these carry trade vaults that the user doesn't have to think about it. The user gets 4 or 5% on their ETH, and that's it. And these are some things we're working on with different DeFi integration partners, namely iPoor and Yearn. So that covers the DeFi retail and DeFi degen components. For the institutions, we are approaching them, and offering them or more like, rather than offering, more like showing them the fact that you can borrow against Lido ETH for such a low interest rate, lowest in the industry. And if you look at this awesome tool that is Spear by Analytica, where it kind of compares all these different protocols over a 12-month time span, like Spark, Aave, Morpho, Fluid, Compound, all the blue chip venues. You can see that Liquity's rates for Lido ETH, Rocket Pool ETH, and ETH is like by far the lowest. Like, I want to say 1.52% cheaper than other venues. So for these capital allocators, like curators, we are speaking to them about maybe borrowing with Liquidity and trying to grow institutional demand that way. And then there's the third component for the stablecoin holders, for bold holders. And this is, for me right now, is the one that is getting a lot of demand and a lot of attention. It's for users who want to hold bold and really value the decentralization and censorship resistant aspect of it. So here, it's not only me shilling, it's also two quite reputable venues, I would say, right now, that are really favoring bold for treasuries. So Pharos is a great tool that Token Breeze, a DeFi user and kind of advocate for DeFi, has created, where he kind of compared all 158 stablecoins in DeFi out there, and it compares, uh, the stablecoin on a variety of things like peg, liquidity, resilience, decentralization. And Liquidity Bold is the only stablecoin that has an A rating. And you might be wondering, okay, what is this A rating based out of? And peg stability, it's an A plus. Exit liquidity is the only one where it has like a B minus in that case. And that mainly is down to, we're a small stablecoin. We have 31 million of a bold supply, but we have 13 million of DEX liquidity supporting that 31 million supply, which is pretty good for our size. But at the end of the day, it's still a smaller stablecoin. But in every other facet, we have like an A plus rating. So resilience, the fact that we don't have any, we're so low risk. Decentralization, we're very low risk, and the dependency aspect of it as well. We're very decentralized, so that makes us this. And this is a thing that we're using, and they're not the only one. We have another one in Blue Chip who have given us an A minus rating, which is another stablecoin ratings agency as well. And if you look at the rating that they've given for decentralized stablecoins, it's one of the only ones that are decentralized that has such a high rating as well. And we're going to different treasuries and foundations, and telling them like, hey, instead of holding all these USDC, USDT, USDS, maybe if you were to allocate a small percentage of your stablecoins into bold, perhaps that might be an interesting way to hold something that is censorship resistant, that can never get blacklisted, and also supporting DeFi, really, because you can get you have something that has no counterparty risk, that you can still get 6%, as I showed you earlier, on the stability pool and on Uniswap and whatnot. You can still get decent yields. So this is also an angle that we're approaching like different treasuries and foundations with. And there we have had like uh, quite a few interested parties who have shown a lot of interest in holding bold, just for its censorship resistant aspect and the yield aspect, because of the risk adjusted yield aspect too. So yeah, those are three elements that we're focusing on, I guess, for the three different crowds: the retail crowd being the carry trade, the institutions and who want to get involved in borrowing but are very cognizant of capital efficiency. We're working on educating them about, hey, this is how you can set your own interest rate. If you don't want to set your own interest rate, we have all these interest rate managers who set it for you, and they're still competitive. And then on the other side, we have the stablecoin treasury side, who are we're telling them about the robust nature of bold, and how you can just hold bold and earn yield on it, but also just just hold bold as a vanilla asset as well.
What's your outlook for the rest of the year, both in terms of DeFi as a whole, but also yeah, concerning Liquity and Bolt? And yeah, if people want to reach out, where can they find you and how can they get in contact?
Yeah, great question. Our outlook for the rest of the year, right now, we operate on a quarter by quarter basis for now. For the next quarter is to really have a lot of these carry trade vaults out there live. That will help grow bold, mint bold, and that's going to be quite important. Another thing is, a lot of these friendly forks, they have to also TGE at some point. So we're working and coordinating with them to achieve GE and maybe reward bold holders as well. That's another thing that we're working on. And then the third thing that we're doing is obviously educating, working with foundations, working with different DAO treasuries in order to have them allocated to bold and doing things with bold as well. Another thing is also working on different integrations of maybe having bold on different money markets where you can have the yield bearing bold as collateral, because that is something that a lot of our users have voiced, where they want to use Y bold, S bold as collateral, borrow USDC, USDT against it, loop that further. So that's something else that we're working on too. But yeah, these are the main four things we want to prioritize in the short term. On the LQTY side, on the PIL side, we are also speaking with different dexes, different stablecoins who want to get involved in the bribing market, who want to get involved in growing their stablecoin against bold. And with the bribing market, the cool thing is that the protocol always has a pot of money that is going to growing stablecoins. So it's all about like being kind of efficient and smart with your bribes and how you play that. So that's also something to keep an eye out for the next few weeks. In terms of getting in touch with us, Twitter is or X is the best venue. Liquity Protocol at Liquity Protocol. You can DM us there. We check our DMs fairly regularly. You can reach out to myself as well on Twitter, SamExotic3, if you have some ideas or anything. And then on our Discord, we have our Liquidity Protocol Discord as well, where if you go onto our X profile, we have like a bio there, and you can just click on that and join our community on Discord as well. We will be at ETC, so if you're going to be at ETC next week, feel free to reach us out on the DMs, and we can meet in person as well.
Great. Was amazing having you on, Sam. And yeah, I'm very excited for what is yet to come for Liquity, and I hope you'll be able to exceed the TVL all-time highs of 2021.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me.
Have a good one.
Thanks.